I was sitting at the head of the dining table for my 65th birthday when my grandson Leo casually walked over, dumped his full cup of grape soda directly into my lap, and smirked. The ice cubes rattled against my dress, the dark purple liquid instantly soaking through the fabric, making my skin cold and sticky. The room went entirely silent for about 2 seconds before Leo, only 12, but already carrying the arrogance of his parents, crossed his arms. "My mom says you don't belong here," he announced, his voice carrying easily over the soft background music. I didn't gasp. I didn't jump out of my chair. I just slowly looked down at the ruined silk of my favorite dress, then shifted my gaze to my daughter-in-law, Sarah. Sarah covered her mouth, but her eyes were dancing with amusement. She let out a short, breathy giggle. My son Mark, who was standing by the kitchen island holding a beer, actually chuckled. "Oh, Mom, don't take it personally," Mark offered, waving a hand dismissively. "He's just at that age where kids repeat things out of context. You know how it is." Sarah stepped forward, not with a towel, but just to grab Leo's empty cup. "Yeah, Diana, we were just joking earlier about how you usually prefer staying in your own quiet house." Leo just misunderstood. Not a single person handed me a napkin. Not one person scolded the boy. The other guests, Sarah's friends and family, just awkwardly looked away or hid their smiles behind their drinks. I was the punchline in my son's house. I picked up a paper napkin from the table, calmly dabbed at the worst of the spill, and stood up. "Well," I smiled softly, my voice perfectly steady. "I suppose that's my cue to leave." Mark frowned, finally sensing that maybe the joke hadn't landed perfectly. "Come on, Mom. Don't be dramatic. We haven't even cut the cake yet." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just picked up my purse, nodded to the room, and walked out the front door. By the time I reached my car, the cold soda clinging to my legs wasn't making me sad. It was waking me up. The drive home was completely silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. For years, I had convinced myself that maintaining a relationship with Mark meant swallowing my pride. I paid for their family vacations, funded Leo's private sports camps, and babysat whenever Sarah wanted a weekend getaway. I thought I was being a supportive mother and grandmother. Instead, I was just a walking ATM that they occasionally invited over to mock. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't even bother changing my ruined dress right away. I walked straight into my home office, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. The house was quiet, smelling of lavender and old books, a stark contrast to the loud, chaotic disrespect I had just left. I logged into my online banking portal. The screen glowed in the dim room, displaying the joint accounts and the credit lines I had linked to Mark and Sarah over the years. There it was, the auto draft for Mark's brand new SUV. He had begged me to co-sign the loan a year ago, claiming his credit was just temporarily tied up. In reality, I was the primary account holder, and the monthly payments came straight from a joint checking account I funded. Then there were the 2 premium credit cards in my name that Sarah carried in her wallet. She called them her emergency cards, but her recent emergencies included designer shoes and a luxury spa day. I clicked on the first card, deactivate. I clicked on the second card, report as lost/stolen, do not issue a replacement. Next came the car loan. I transferred the entire balance of the joint checking account back into my private savings. Without my funds, the auto payment scheduled for tomorrow morning would bounce. But I didn't stop there. Since my name was the primary one on the title and the loan I logged into the lender's portal canceled the grace period protections and formally withdrew my financial guarantee, flagging the account for non-payment. It took exactly 20 minutes to untangle my financial life from theirs. I closed the laptop, took a warm shower, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in a decade. I woke up the next morning at my usual time, 6 o'clock. I brewed a pot of dark roast coffee, opened the blinds to let the morning sun in, and sat at my kitchen island with a crossword puzzle. The air felt lighter today. At exactly 7:45 a.m., my cell phone vibrated on the counter. The caller ID flashed Mark's name. I took a slow sip of my coffee and let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Then came the text messages. Mom, pick up. Mom, what did you do? Where is my car? I smiled, filling in a 5-letter word for liberated. Freed. By 8:10 a.m., there was a frantic, heavy knocking at my front door. I didn't rush. I rinsed my coffee mug, dried my hands on a towel, and walked over to the entryway. I pulled open the heavy wooden door to find Mark standing on my porch. He was breathing hard, his hair messy, still wearing his pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt. The usual smugness he carried was completely gone, replaced by a pale, panicked expression. "My car is gone," he blurted out, skipping any greeting. "Good morning, Mark," I replied, leaning casually against the door frame. "Mom, the tow truck took my SUV right out of the driveway. I called the bank, and they said the payment bounced, and the primary account holder pulled backing. They repossessed it." He threw his hands up in the air. "You have to call them right now and fix this." "I can't do that," I answered simply. "What do you mean you can't? You have the money. Just transfer it back and tell them it was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I corrected him gently. "I removed my financial support. That car is too expensive for you to afford on your own, so the bank took it back." "That's how loans work, Mark." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You're doing this over a little spilled soda. Over a joke." "No." I adjusted my cardigan. "I'm doing this because I don't belong there. Your wife made that clear. I'm just agreeing with her." Before he could shout another demand, I quietly shut the front door until it clicked, sliding the deadbolt into place. I was barely back in the kitchen before my phone started ringing again. This time, it was Sarah. I knew exactly what her strategy would be. She was the type of woman who used anger to mask her loss of control. I tapped the green button and put her on speakerphone, setting the device on the marble counter. "Diana." Sarah snapped immediately, her voice sharp and nasal. "What is wrong with you, Mark, is out of his mind. You stranded us. How am I supposed to get Leo to soccer practice today? You'll have to figure that out, Sarah. You still have your sedan." I reminded her calmly, chopping an apple for my breakfast. "That's not the point. You cut off the credit cards too. I tried to buy groceries this morning and my card was declined in front of everyone." She shrieked. "You are being incredibly petty and vindictive." "They are my credit cards, Sarah. I simply closed my accounts." I heard her take a deep, shaky breath, preparing her ultimate weapon. It was the same weapon she used every time she wanted me to bend to her will. "Listen to me very carefully, Diana," she hissed. "If you don't turn those cards back on and get Mark's car back today, you will never see Leo again. I won't let my son be around a toxic grandmother." In the past, that threat would have sent me into a panic. I would have apologized, written a check, and begged for forgiveness just to maintain peace. But today, the threat held absolutely no weight. I thought about Leo pouring the sticky soda on my lap while Sarah laughed. "Okay," I agreed easily. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. "What?" she finally whispered. I said, "Okay. If you feel I'm toxic, you should absolutely keep Leo away from me. I respect your decision as a mother." "Wait, I have a lot of chores to do today, Sarah. Best of luck with the groceries." I tapped the red button, cutting off whatever she was about to say next. The silence in my kitchen was beautiful. I finished eating my apple, feeling an incredible sense of clarity. The fear of losing them had kept me trapped for years. Now that I accepted the loss, they had absolutely no power over me. After breakfast, I walked into my garage. For the last 3 years, Mark and Sarah had treated my home like their personal storage unit. Half of my garage was filled with Sarah's unsold inventory from her failed multi-level marketing businesses. Mark's old golf clubs and boxes of seasonal decorations. They didn't want cluttering their own house. Worse, they had a key to my front door. They regularly let themselves in to drop things off or raid my pantry when I wasn't home. I picked up my phone and called a local locksmith. He arrived within the hour. I had him rekey the front door, the back door, and the side garage entrance. I paid him in cash, thanking him for his quick work. Once he left, I went to the hardware store and bought a stack of heavy-duty cardboard boxes. I spent the entire afternoon in the garage. I didn't rush, but I worked with purpose. I packed up every single item that belonged to them. The scented candles Sarah tried to sell, the ugly holiday wreaths Mark's sports gear. I taped the boxes shut and stacked them neatly at the very edge of my driveway, right near the curb. I draped a large blue tarp over the boxes to protect them from the elements and secured it with a few bungee cords. Then I sent Mark a single text message. Your storage boxes are at the end of my driveway. Please pick them up by trash day on Thursday. After that, whatever is left will be donated. I didn't wait for a reply. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, poured myself a glass of iced tea, and sat on my back patio. For the first time in years, my home felt entirely like mine. There were no ghosts of their entitlement lingering in my space. I watched the birds at my feeder, enjoying the afternoon breeze, knowing exactly what was coming next, and completely unafraid of it. Around 6 o'clock that evening, the motion sensor alert on my phone chimed. I glanced at the screen and saw Mark's remaining car, Sarah's older sedan, pull into my driveway. I didn't get up. I stayed on my couch, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, and switched my TV to the front porch camera feed. Mark stomped up the front steps, carrying a heavy duffel bag. Sarah was right behind him, holding Leo by the arm. They looked furious, clearly planning to ambush me inside my own home, likely to drop Leo off so they could deal with the mess they were in. Mark shoved his key into the deadbolt. He turned it. Nothing happened. He jiggled the handle, pulled the key out, checked it, and shoved it back in, forcing it left and right. The lock didn't budge. It's not working, he barked at Sarah. Just knock, she's probably hiding in there, Sarah ordered, crossing her arms tightly. Mark began pounding on the door. Mom, open up. We know you're in there. I pressed the microphone button on my phone app. My voice came through the porch speaker, calm and clear. Please stop hitting my door, Mark. You're going to damage the paint. All three of them jumped, looking up at the small camera. Did you change the locks? Mark yelled at the camera. Are you insane? We need to drop Leo off. We have meetings with the bank, and we can't take him with us. Sarah informed me this morning that I am toxic and not allowed to be around Leo. I reminded them through the speaker. I am respecting her boundaries. You'll have to hire a sitter. Sarah pushed past Mark, glaring into the lens. Diana, stop playing games. Open this door right now. My home is no longer available for your convenience, I answered smoothly. Your boxes are at the curb. Have a safe drive home. I released the microphone button and muted the camera audio. I watched the screen as they stood there for another full minute arguing with each other on my porch before finally turning around, defeated, and walking back to their car. The absolute shock on their faces was something I would remember for a very long time. 2 days passed without a word. I spent my time gardening, reading, and completely ignoring the minor drama unfolding across town. On Wednesday afternoon, I was at the local grocery store picking up fresh vegetables when I heard my name. I turned to see Sarah walking quickly down the aisle toward me. She didn't have her usual perfectly styled hair, and she looked exhausted. Diana! Hi, she managed, trying to force a tight, unnatural smile. Hello, Sarah, I replied, placing a bundle of asparagus into my cart. She looked around nervously before stepping closer. Look, things have been really stressful. Mark is a mess without his car, and I had to cancel Leo's summer camp because we couldn't pay the balance without your card. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this. I didn't stop shopping. I moved down the aisle to inspect the tomatoes. I'm not fighting Sarah. I just stopped paying. Her fake smile faltered, her true frustration leaking through. It was just soda. Diana Leo is a kid. You are ruining our lives over a spilled drink. I finally stopped and looked directly into her eyes. My expression was perfectly neutral. It was never about the soda, Sarah. It was about the fact that you laughed. It was about the fact that you told your son, I don't belong in your family, while happily spending the money from my bank account. I was just venting. You know how Mark is. He expects me to do everything. That is between you and your husband, I interrupted softly. I am no longer part of your financial equation. You are adults. You will adjust. We can't adjust, she whispered harshly, her face flushing. We don't have the savings for this lifestyle. Then you will have to change your lifestyle, I offered. I pushed my cart past her. Have a good afternoon, Sarah. I walked away, leaving her standing frozen in the produce section. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. For the first time, the consequences of their actions belonged entirely to them, and I refused to carry their bags anymore. Thursday morning arrived, which meant it was trash day. I looked out my front window and saw that the tarp was gone and the boxes I had left by the curb were completely cleared out. Mark must have come by in the middle of the night to swallow his pride and load up Sarah's sedan. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Mark standing alone this time, holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. He looked miserable. I opened the door, but kept the screen door locked between us. Hey, Mom, he mumbled, holding up the flowers awkwardly. Can I come in? We need to talk. We can talk right here, Mark. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. Look, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry Leo dumped the drink on you. I'm sorry we laughed. Sarah is just... She's been stressed, and I wasn't thinking. We messed up. He paused clearly, waiting for me to unlock the screen door, pull him into a hug, and tell him everything was fine. He was waiting for the mother who always folded. Thank you for apologizing. I nodded. He brightened a little. So, can we fix this? The bank said, if you call and reinstate the guarantee, they might let me restructure the auto loan. And Sarah really needs that credit card for household expenses. I looked at my son, a grown man asking his retired mother to fund his luxury life because he refused to tell his wife, no. Mark, my apology. Acceptance does not come with a checkbook, I told him gently. His face fell instantly. Mom, come on. I said I was sorry. What else do you want? I don't want anything. That's the point. I am stepping back. You and Sarah need to figure out your own finances. I am done being your safety net. You're just going to abandon us, he demanded, his tone turning bitter again. I am letting you stand on your own 2 feet, I corrected. Take the flowers home to your wife, Mark. She probably needs them more than I do. I closed the main door, sliding the deadbolt. The conversation was over, and this time I knew he finally understood that I meant it. A week later, my friend Maggie dragged me out of the house. We are celebrating your birthday properly, she insisted, linking her arm through mine as we walked into a beautiful downtown bistro. Maggie was my age, sharp-witted, and knew everything that had happened. We ordered wine, shared a massive plate of seafood, and laughed until my ribs ached. There were no tense silences, no walking on eggshells, and no passive-aggressive jokes at my expense. So, Maggie leaned in, swirling her wine. I heard through the grapevine that Sarah is working part-time at the boutique downtown now. I took a sip of my drink, genuinely surprised. Is she good for her? And Mark traded in her sedan for 2 used compact cars so they can both get to work. Maggie added, watching my face closely. Does it bother you? I thought about it for a second. I pictured Sarah folding clothes at a retail job instead of swiping my credit card at the spa. I pictured Mark having to budget his paycheck instead of relying on my safety net. No, I smiled truthfully. It doesn't bother me at all. It sounds like they are finally growing up. Good, Maggie beamed, raising her glass. To boundaries. To boundaries. I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. For the rest of the evening, we didn't talk about Mark, Sarah, or Leo. We talked about a trip to Italy we had always wanted to take. We talked about gardening. We talked about our own lives. I realized that for the past 5 years, my entire identity had been wrapped up in managing my son's crises. Without their chaos pulling me down, I suddenly had so much space in my brain and my heart. When I went home that night, I didn't check my phone for missed calls. I didn't worry if Mark was mad at me. I just took off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and went to sleep in my quiet, peaceful house. 6 months passed. Autumn turned the leaves in my front yard a brilliant shade of gold. My life settled into a wonderful, steady rhythm. I booked that trip to Italy with Maggie for the following spring. I renovated my guest room, turning it into a beautiful art studio for my watercolor painting, a hobby I had abandoned years ago because that room had always been reserved for Leo. I still saw Mark occasionally. He came by on Thanksgiving alone for about an hour. He looked older, more tired, but surprisingly a little more grounded. He drank a cup of coffee, updated me on his job, and left, without asking for a single dime. Sarah hadn't spoken to me since the grocery store, and Leo was still kept at a distance. I sent him a card for his 13th birthday with a modest $20 bill inside. I didn't expect a thank you note, and I didn't get one. Some people might look at my situation and think it was a tragedy. They might think a mother should endure anything to keep her family close. But they don't understand the heavy, suffocating weight of being tolerated rather than loved. By removing my money, I removed their power to hurt me. I didn't need to argue, yell, or seek revenge. I just stepped out of the game they were playing. I was sitting on my back porch one chilly morning, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the sun rise. My coffee was hot, the neighborhood was completely silent, and I felt a deep, profound sense of relief. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a bank. I wasn't the punchline to a cruel joke. I was just Diana. And for the first time in a very long time, I belonged exactly where I was.